Sunny it's hard, but it's important. You need to do it. It's just no tradition. Don't want to know. I can't kiss you. I should do. Ask your video.
We will cover 3 ways to cone up and down, and a few issues that beginner and even seasoned potters may encounter while on the wheel.
Are you ready? Let's do it!
So in this video, we're going to go over different ways to center, 3 ways to cone up, 3 ways to cone down, to best help you center your piece of clay. Now, I don't recommend just slamming it down because sometimes you miss. And if you miss, you have to manually push it to the center. So instead, what I like doing is rolling it and rotating it like it's a joystick to create a little center point, this middle. And then what I do is I get some water, spin my wheel, rub my clay ball to create slip on my finger, and then I dot the center so I know exactly where to put this center point here. So I line it up, place it on top, and then I just push down on the outside at 3 and 9. And we'll talk about time in a second. Then I rotate the wheel, push down, rotate the wheel, push down. And as I'm doing this, I'm rotating the wheel with my hands and not the pedal. Or you could rotate and then twist, and that helps. And so by just doing that, I already get the clay close to the edge of the bat so that I can seal it. So that's step 1, cone clay to bat. Step 2 is sealing the edge. But before we talk about sealing the edge, let's talk about time in relationship to your wheel head. So if we were to imagine this is a clock, we have our midnight, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. Those are our main times. When we center, our hands will usually fall around 7 and 2. And I'll go over hand placement in a second. But when we seal our edge, we're applying pressure at 3 o'clock with the sponge so that we blend this edge of clay into the bat so no water can get underneath. So step number 2 is sealing your edge. So I spin the wheel and I want to look to make sure this is more or less centered before I start. And it looks pretty good. So I take my sponge, anchor my arms to my legs, and apply downwards pressure at 3 o'clock to seal that clay so that no water can get underneath. This created a little undercut, and that's totally fine. So now I'm ready to push it down even more so I get this stuck and I don't have any risk of this popping off. So that's step 2. Step 3 is to push it down. So when we push it down, you can use your hands in either the push or the support. So I'm left-handed, so I like using my left hand to push down and my right hand to support. Most people like bracing with their left and using their right. Either or, whichever hand is on top, the thumb is on the inside of the outside hand. So if you're using your left hand, brace with your right with the C at 3 o'clock, hand on top, and you're pushing straight down to flatten the clay, and you slowly slide your hand outwards to 9 to mirror your right hand to create it back into a cone shape. If you're doing it with your left hand as the brace, then you just switch. Push down, slide your right hand out until it mirrors your left, and then you let it sit, and then you get it stuck. So whenever we push it down to get it really stuck, we have to make sure that it still looks like this cone. Alright, next step is to start coning up and coning down. So there are a few ways to cone up and down, and I'm going to show you 3 separate ways. Now the first thing you want to remember is the clock, going back to the clock. So your left hand should fall naturally down, and your elbow of your left should be on your leg, ideally closer to your belly button. So if we were to draw a line that extends from our wrist bone outwards into the heel of our hand, this line should go diagonally across the piece at around 8 o'clock. And then it's going to push this direction. All right, so we're pushing the clay. So locking your hand, using this as the leverage. Your opposite hand, your right hand, is going to receive that pressure on the opposite side at 2 o'clock, and it's going to pull the clay towards you. So your hand should be at 8 and 2. Left hand pushes the clay right hand pulls the clay. And in order to do this with leverage, you're going to place your left hand closer to your body and then really lean forward. So just by leaning forward, you can see my left hand going in closer, and when I lean back, it goes out. So if you use your body weight as leverage, your elbow's locked into your hip and your leg, and your clay won't move. Now, if it's free floating or up in the air, odds are your hands are going to wiggle. So this is called the offset, and this is the method that I like teaching beginners because it usually gives the most success. So the first thing is this undercut we have to keep in mind. We want to push that away, and when we cone up, we're going to push the clay to compress at the bottom with equal pressure with both hands. Right hand pulls, left hand pushes, and as we feel the clay compress at the base, we're going to slowly slide our hands up. We don't want to keep it there long enough and create a little mushroom, because that mushroom or that expansion, which I'll show you in a second, can cause the clay to rip off or the whole bat to lift up. So what I mean by that is when you push at the bottom, you'll feel the clay compress. And as you push, if I keep pushing in one spot and I don't slide my hands up, we create this undercut that starts making this top balloon up and out and looks like a mushroom. So if I were to keep squeezing that and then I try to lift up, odds are when you lift up the whole bat. Or if you squeeze this top section too hard, you end up letting this twist off the base and then it rips off. So one thing to remember, when you cone up, you have to make sure that you slide your hands up with the clay to get it into that nice cone shape. Okay, so let's bring it back down. Okay, so that was tip number 1 for coning up, ensuring that you slide your hands up with even pressure to not create any undercuts, to keep a nice gradual cone. Tip number 2 is when you cone up, always make sure that your top is not flat. If your top is flat when you cone up, what's going to happen is you're going to create a divot. So it looks something like this when you cone up if you have a flat top. So as you cone up, this top section here starts to concave on you. If I cone up even more, that gets deeper and deeper, and if I go even higher, it'll just go deeper throughout the clay. So the reason why this happens, as you cone up, the sides of the clay always rise faster than the middle. So if the middle and the sides are the same level, then the sides will rise up, the middle will sink down, and you get this crevice. So in order to get rid of it, easy to do that. Take one of your hands, put your thumb between your middle and ring finger. This little groove right here goes directly over that right angle, this little edge, and then you just push down. Okay, you can do the same thing with your right hand, and then, or you can do it with both hands. And then your goal is to get it back to pointy. The more pointy it is when you cone up, the less likely you'll concave the center. Okay, so now let's go back to coning up using the offset. So remember, hands at 8 and 2, sponge hands pulls, brace hand pushes. So I apply pressure at the bottom, thumbs are up, squeeze the clay, and as the clay compresses and rises, both hands rise, then my left hand will then cup over the top and stay there for a few seconds, and then I release. So this is cone up. All right. So this cone down technique pairs really well with the offset, which is this one, and that is called the karate chop. So my pressure for my left hand still applies at 8 o'clock, and I'm still pushing this way. My right hand now, instead of pulling the clay, I'm compressing down, going across the top like this, using the side of my right hand, and that applies pressure at around 4 o'clock. So when I apply pressure, my right hand is over the top like this, using the side of my right hand. My left hand's applying pressure inward, going this way. And I like holding the sponge in my right hand as I do this so I can squeeze water as I compress. So I'm using this hand, the side, interlocking my thumb of my left hand into the pinky of my right like this. And then since my hand is not tall enough to rest at the bottom, I'm going to float it at the top. And as I get lower, my left hand slides down until it hits the bottom. So start at the top. And the main thing about this is you're not pushing straight down. You got to push diagonally forward. Okay, so if you push straight down, I'm going to show you what happens. The clay expands in every direction and it mushrooms out. So the clay expands every single direction and it's hard to center. So it's better to push diagonally forward because as it expands going this way, your left hand is there to catch the center off centerness, and it recenters it as it rotates. So going back to the cone up, we're pushing down at a diagonal forward angle. So I interlock my elbows, I interlock my fingers, put the hand on top, and my right hand is applying downwards pressure at a forward angle, 45. So as it gets lower, you can see that it's staying nice and centered. My left hand's getting closer to the bat. And once it touches the bat, I can kind of leave it there for a few seconds and then I can release. It's still slightly off, so I can do one final adjustment where I coat the clay, get rid of my skirt here because I want my pinky of my left hand to get right up against the clay. And I'm going to do that same karate chop, this time with my left hand braced against the clay. And I'm going to really lean both hands into the piece to center this. So I'm really leaning my body weight into my left hand. And then once I feel it centered, I lean back and I back off the pressure, and then we have a nice centered piece. So that is the first way to cone up and cone down for centering, which is the offset. And that is the way that I recommend and I prefer. All right, the next way. Some students like this better, but it can be a little more difficult. So the next way is you're using the heels of your hands at 3 and 9 o'clock. You're still applying pressure here. So your heels of your hands are like this, squeezing the clay inward. Your fingers, your right hand goes first, left hand goes on top. Okay, and you squeeze by tilting your wrists inward at the base. That creates that undercut. Then your hands level out and then compress and come into a point. Now the hard part about this requires more strength because you're literally squeezing the clay between your two hands. So you're not really using leverage, you're using strength. So if your clay is really stiff or you just don't have the strength to do it, this one can be a little more difficult. And I do like holding the sponge between my fingers like this so I can keep it lubricated. So hands into place. So your hands is basically on the top corners of your piece. So right there and there. Heels right here. Okay. Hands in place, spin the wheel. Apply pressure at the base by tilting the bottom of my hands inward, and then I kind of straighten it out, and both hands rise, and then both hands get to the top by crossing my thumbs, and I keep it there for a few seconds, and then I release. So that is coning up with the heels of my hands. Okay, I created a skirt here, so I always get rid of that skirt by applying downwards pressure at 3 o'clock to remove it, because I don't want my hands to go and ride that skirt up, and then I push higher than it should. So always get rid of that skirt. A nice vertical wall. All right, the next way to cone down. This is the way I also like coning down once you get a little more experience. And this is the one hand diagonally push forward. So your left hand pushes forward down, or your right hand pushes forward down. Whichever hand doesn't push is supporting the outside. Since I'm left-handed, I prefer my left hand to push. And to show you how dramatic this looks, when you find the right angles and the right pressure, I'm going to really cone this thing up really, really high, or it's actually off camera. And let's bring this down a little bit. Okay, right there. Okay. So to see how dramatic this clay can bend forward without it breaking, for this cone down, you're going to take your left hand or your right hand, put your thumb between your pointer finger and middle finger, and it creates this little groove here. This little groove fits perfectly on the tip of your piece. Then you wrap your fingers around and you drive the clay diagonally down. So it can be either or. Okay, and I'm left-handed, so I'm going to show you how it looks with my left. So put my hand, and if you do it correctly, you could technically center with one hand by applying that forward pressure. And so my pressure is pushing diagonally down this way. So this part of my hand is driving the clay down until it's more or less centered, and then I lean back the pressure, and then I have a nice centered piece. Like I said, it could be done with the right hand as well. So if you cone up, and you get your right hand in the right spot, and you push forward, you could center with one hand essentially. Okay, but I don't expect most people to do that, and two hands is always easier. So for this cone down, you cone up like you normally would, create and get rid of that skirt. Right hand braces on the outside, left hand on top. You can connect your thumb and your hand together like this. And remember, your right hand is driving the clay down diagonally forward, and my right hand, these fingers here are squeezing the clay at the base, And when it gets a little lower, my left hand separates, and then I can squeeze again at the base here, and I get a nice centered piece. Whenever I throw large pieces, I tend to go for the left hand push because I feel like it's a little easier for me. So as you gain experience, that is the preferred method that I like, and you may see other potters kind of gravitate towards that. So the right hand still works the same way, still set up the same way. The only difference is you brace with your left and you push forward with your right. And as the clay expands outwards, the hands release, and then you squeeze the clay at the base. All right, so for this cone down, your thumb is over the top. You're basically facing towards midnight. You create the little groove that goes over the tip. Your right hand braces on the outside. And remember, it is interchangeable, so it can be either or. And then as you push down, your left hand is going to push. And as it gets lower, your left thumb is going to separate from the body of your hand, and it's going to open up, and your left fingers interlock and grip the bottom. So it looks something like this. Push down at that forward diagonal pressure. My left thumb is releasing from my hand, and then it interlocks and starts engaging at the base just like my right hand does. And then what I like doing is I actually just start pushing harder down like this with my left hand to really compress that top. And then my left hand goes upwards, and then I can flatten it. Okay, and it is interchangeable. You can do that with the right. This is what it looks like with the right hand. Brace with the left, thumb connecting to my hand, pushing forward, squeezing as it gets lower, hand separates, and then I start engaging and pushing down with my thumb, and then both hands gently release. Okay, so that is using the heels of your hand and the single hand to cone down. All right, the last way to cone down is just a variation of the heels. All right, the last way to cone up. We are still applying pressure at 3 and 9, but instead of the heels of our hand applying pressure, we're using the palms of our hand. So we just drop our hands down, and we still apply pressure the same way by tilting our wrists inward to apply pressure at the base. Then we slowly straighten our hands out to mirror each other, then slide our hands up to make a point, and crossing our thumbs to get to the top. The only difference is this requires the most strength because as you squeeze inward, this is much harder than with our heels. So sometimes this may gradually shift and squeezing this way, which then becomes very similar to the offset. But try and see what works best for you. So this is what it looks like. And this usually works best with soft clay. So you squeeze the clay at the base, and you can really feel the clay kind of push against your body. And then you slowly slide your hands up, and it gets to the very top, and then you release. So that's the cone up. And just to kind of show you how to cone down using the next step, I'm going to do that one more time to get this a little taller, this time holding the sponge in my left hand. So really squeeze in the clay, and then both hands rise up, and then they cross. Okay, get rid of the skirt, and now I'm ready to cone down. So for the cone down, this way requires both hands. You end up crossing your thumbs, wrapping your hands around the clay, and you're tilting your wrist forward and driving the clay diagonally down going this way. So same concept, you're still driving the clay down, but this time you have two hands to brace the clay. So it looks something like this. Cross your thumbs, and you're crossing your thumbs at 6 o'clock on the clay, so if I were to create an X right below the point here, that's where the X of your thumb should be. So it looks something like this. Cross, wrap, and push. And here I'm just going to do all three so you can see the process. As you cone up and down, you may notice you end up having this flat part or this kind of nub here. So to get rid of that, two ways. Number one, brace your elbows on your legs, hold the sponge between both hands like you're a weird looking T-Rex, apply downwards pressure in the center, and then slowly move the sponge outwards towards your 3 o'clock. You keep repeating until this is flat. The other way is use the karate chop, apply pressure where that nub is, and then really lean your body weight forward into it. Now the downside of the karate chop is if you're not stable with your left hand as you apply pressure, you can off-center this whole thing. Alright, the last thing I want to show you guys is centering just with one hand using your brace hand, your left hand. Okay, so I'm going to purposely push this off center. And like we talked about before, your left hand, ideally, the best and more stable way to center is you drop your hand at 8 o'clock and you really lean your body weight by pushing your body into your hand and transfer it into the clay. Now to do this, you gotta interlock your elbow into your hip where it meets your torso, and you just lean forward into the clay. Now if you see it wobbly, you can see how that wobble can melt away just by really bracing and leaning your body into the clay. Right there, you got it centered. So if you can master the brace and push, then your centering will become much easier. It's all about leverage, using it to your advantage. Okay, so that is coning up and coning down in 3 different ways.
If you want to see anything, comment below. I don't like and subscribe for more videos coming